Chapter 3, Alva. Back in Stockholm, Mom and Dad got married at County Hall because now we were going to be a real family, and they sat with their wine and beer bottles at the kitchen table in our apartment and drank. For Elsa and me, life continued as usual with kindergarten and fine and our brother's visits. We had our best friend, Titi, who was amazed to see us again after our months in Marseille. Yes, we were back, and after 2 minutes we were again acquainted with Titi and could pick up where we left off last time. We lived in the apartment opposite Titi's and ran in and out of each other's houses. We jumped from the climbing frame and watched Astrid Lindgren movies, played house in the cushion room at daycare, jumped in water puddles in our rubber boots, and learned to skate in Kungsträdgården. Come on, Elsa Bell, or Alva Half, or whoever you are. Come on, twins, Titi said. To her, we were like one and the same person. To most people we were, but Elsa and I knew that we were two different souls. Yet the fusion did not disturb us, but united and reassured us. It was Christmas, and Elsa and I got new dolls and a doll's pram, which we played with for hours. Elsa knew all the doll games, and she loved her doll children, and her feelings rubbed off on me, even though I preferred to play with the He-Man figures that my brothers had left in the apartment. Between us, we had our own private jokes and facial expressions. I wrinkled my nose, she puffed up her cheeks. Our own body language, she shrugged her shoulders and I wiggled my head. Our own words. Saturday we called blue flower for some reason. Doll was Diddy Dee, evil was Dai, and candy was Nana. We were the same but different. I wanted to be funny. She was mild-mannered. Where she stopped, I started, and vice versa. We were buddies. Who helped each other hide fish we didn't want to eat under the napkin. We were adventurers, challenging each other to go out into the stairwell and take small steps further from the safe light of our hall into the echoing uncertainty. We were each other's parent and child as we lay next to each other in bed at night, me stroking a lock of her hair between my thumb and forefinger. Like the waves at Marseille, everything must rise and fall, come and go. Elsa's and my early childhood came to an end, and another, much more difficult, time began. Dad couldn't handle boundaries, and alcohol had a very negative effect on him. When he started to lose control, he hurt Elsa and me. It was as if we were placed on different sides of a wall because I was too small to convey these experiences, and so was she. Everything was too frightening and large. Otherwise, we remained twins in the eyes of others and to each other, but we could never talk to each other about what Dad did because we couldn't understand it, could barely endure it, and what there is no language for somehow doesn't exist. Sometimes I cried and sometimes she cried when one of us was taken away to be alone with Dad. When he went away with Elsa, I turned myself off, and all the feelings turned into nothingness, like inside a coffin. If it was me he took, I discovered that I was not really there with him. Instead, I was up on the ceiling, stroking the cornice, without feelings or needs, bobbing against the ceiling structures. But even though the lack of safety together with Dad was palpable, I felt important to him. Elsa and I taught him what a human being is like, our personalities and our feelings and optimism about life, and he imitated. In return for this service, he took us on adventures and played with us. But as I said, it came at a price, and that price was power and control. He needed me, and I felt important, but it cost my psyche dearly. On the other hand, my sister and I were still young, and it was what it was. We adapted. Everyday life went on. We were on an excursion with the kindergarten. We walked two by two in a line with one teacher first in line and another teacher last. Now that we were a little older, we went to the library at Odenplan, to the bathhouse, to a museum, a farm, and on this particular day, we were out in the countryside, and it was springtime, and we ate buns and drank juice by the boulder that was fun to climb. Hello down there, the kids shouted. Hello up there, replied those who were land animals, while others were mountaineers. I had been caught up in a game of my own and climbed over to the back of the boulder. I longed. Yes, I would take off and I would fly, of course. And so I left the rough boulder and jumped into midair. Was it a dream or was it real? I hovered for quite a while, soaring between the boulder and the ground before finally landing among dandelions and blades of grass. And so it continued at regular intervals. Although I had one foot in the everyday physical world with mud cookies in the kindergarten playground and snacks of roast soup and ice cream, I was also somewhere else. Elsa was tiny and independent and took on the role of mediator among our kindergarten peers. She stood and watched me as I crossed the line between here and there, between fear and contentment. My multiple realities crossed in and out, and I started screaming in terror in the middle of a game. I wanted to be normal. My friends were preoccupied with beaded plates and stuffed animals and drawings. I wanted to care about that too. And Elsa was there for support, and so was our Freya Fine when she came to look after us and unknowingly patch us up with her safe presence and fill our pantries with love. When we were 6 years old, Freya had moved to Norway, and Elsa and I had moved to Enköping, to a terraced house that my father had bought. Elsa and I went to preschool. Mom worked as an assistant nurse or studied, or was on sick leave. She alternated between the three. Either way, she was absent, even when she was at home. She would lie in bed, drugged by pills and alcohol, in a semi-hibernation around the clock. Dad traveled and was away a lot, and Mom avoided him when he was home. What had been a spark of recognition between them, which could have been interpreted as love, had now turned into hate. But somehow they loved to hate. My and Elsa's older half-brothers, who were now 14 and 16 years old, lived in the basement when they came to visit. Dad otherwise used the basement as a kind of hobby room. Our townhouse was at the bottom of a turning point, and behind it was a grove of trees. Elsa and I were out there collecting wood louses, beetles, and ladybirds. Bugs. We crawled around in the bushes so that our pants got stained and the smell of dirt lingered on our fingers. The school was in the other side of the grove, and We went there with a girl who was paid a penny to guide us in the mornings. She was in the fourth grade herself and seemed incredibly big to us. She was a nice girl, and sometimes she would come and ring the bell to take us to the playground. She gave us erasers from her large collection. We loved her. I wanted to impress her by climbing up the swing set. Elsa showed her appreciation by imitating the girl's way of moving and speaking. When we started first grade, we went to school on our own with matching jackets and backpacks. The school was an old building with 4 floors, and the first graders were on the bottom floor. There was a schoolyard and a gymnasium and a barrack with a small library. It was serious now. We were no longer in the little building among the toddlers, but we were proper school children for real. Elsa and I were two chubby 7-year-olds with big curly hair, green eyes and freckles, and we had lost our front teeth so that we were showing off mischievous smiles. Though we weren't normally impish, especially Elsa, because we were able to isolate the experiences of fear and pain that was sometimes endured at home. We seemed to be just like any other child, and we enjoyed learning poems and were careful to follow the teacher's instructions. We were keen to appear normal. Inside, I knew I wasn't normal, and even though we didn't have a language to discuss this with each other, I think Elsa felt the same way. Our games could get out of hand, dolls could get hurt, but Elsa was still so easygoing. For me, life became more challenging. I broke down and sobbed while Elsa calmly stood by my side and let me cry, and when I looked at her, she smiled. Yes, she was still the Elsa she had always been, but she had nightmares and sleepwalked sometimes. One time, she sat in the doll's basket and peed when she was sleepwalking and thought she was on the toilet, which we laughed about in the morning. Entering the first grade forced me to face my shyness, and that was not easy for an overconfident, optimistic child, which I still basically was. I had always been seen myself as strong and capable, but there in the big school I discovered a different Alva. One that turned red when asked to speak in front of the class. One that got scared and trembled when it felt like the other children were staring at me. I couldn't speak at all, couldn't get a word out. But I had Elsa, she was my translator and spoke for both of us. Somehow, Elsa and I ended up retreating and playing our own games in the schoolyard, while the other children were jumping rope or playing thief and policeman. They didn't ask if we wanted to join in. At the time, I assumed it was because of me, but in retrospect, I think that the others were forming relationships with each other, creating friendships, and they realized that for me and Elsa, that was already a done deal. We got bikes for Christmas, sturdy bikes with red paint, glittery stickers, and shiny black saddles. There were bells to ring so that others would look out for you as you rode along. When the snow and ice melted, Dad taught us how to ride a bike, and then we went back and forth along the street. It was such a wonderful feeling. In the photographs taken then, I can see our big smiles as we hold each other, she with half-grown front teeth, me still toothless. I'm wearing a striped top hat, but she's hoodless, and the spring sun shines on her curly hair. Two tiny warriors. The game now was passed from one to the other. I read her back, which said that we are now in a race. Well, I thought, and pushed my feet against the paddle. I biked so fast that I hit a curb, fell, and scraped my forehead and knee where there was a hole in my pants. Let me see, said Elsa, trying to turn my face towards her, but the darkness had come over me. I didn't want her comfort. She could stand there and be a cycling champ all she wanted. I had better things to do. I sulked all evening, even though she made low-key jokes to cheer me up. I got up and lay down on the bottom bunk of our bunk bed and put my thumb in my mouth. She waited patiently on the edge of the bed, her little fingers braiding the threads of the blanket, and she occasionally suggested we play in the fort in the woods. Looking back, I wonder if we knew, Elsa and I, she in her way and I in mine. Now the waves had washed ashore. Now time had run out. At school, we had to write little letters to each other, and Elsa chose me as the recipient. I remember it so well, I will never forget it. Even though the letter itself has been lost, I carry the words in my heart like a tattoo. My best friend is Alva, because Alva is my twin. I love Alva, from Elsa. A heart can be broken, but still keep on beating. And that's what happened when Elsa died. I have a time gap regarding the weeks before and after her death. But I've heard a bit about it, and I can remember other things on an emotional level. How she coughed. The kid has a cold again, the parents said. How she got a fever when Mom was drunk in the bedroom. How her breathing became labored and her lips blue. I must have been there, must have laid next to her, held her, tried to grab her. Finally went and shook the life back into Mom. They had to take the kid to the hospital, pneumonia, doctor said, with complications. Unfortunately, the doctor said, she didn't make it. But I didn't realize she was dead. She was certainly not here with me, which was strange, an alien feeling. I thought I would wait patiently and then she would come home, because she had to. I remember fragments of the funeral. It took place on a grey misty day at the end of April, with a winter feeling rather than spring. My fingers looked so white against the dark blue coat, and I looked at the shiny grey headstone, but especially at the strange conifers and their star-shaped needles. I couldn't for the life of me understand why we were here staring at a stone. Couldn't we go home and wait for her? I sat in our room with the bookshelves and stuffed animals on a chair at the red table. My relatives' voices could be heard outside the door, but I sat frozen in the room, trying to talk to Elsa, but Elsa was not there, but not gone. Hide and seek, I thought, but couldn't bring myself to smile. I don't know if I asked where Elsa had gone, nor if I cried. Mom and Dad were fighting, drinking, feeling sorry for themselves. It was business as usual. No one talked about Elsa or her death, and I was too young to understand. Emotions rose like waves, and I didn't know why they came or what they meant. But I went along for the ride. Now my feelings were silent and mute, as if inside a brick wall in my mind. I could not make a sound. In the immediate aftermath of Elsa's death, I walked as if through a tunnel. The tunnel was decorated with meals and events, things that belonged to everyday life, but I was actually in an infinite emptiness. I didn't recognize myself in that emptiness. I didn't feel my body. I left Elsa and disappeared. At the same time, My search began there. It has been many years, but the loss is still present. Otherwise, existence in everyday life has continued as it does. I have now lived a whole life without my twin. Now I am here, in my loft in Stockholm. Today is a frostbitten December day in the country of Sweden on the planet Tellus. I'm 42 years old. I enjoy Christmas. No particular childhood trauma darkens the holiday for me as it does for many others. The Christmas stars and electrical candles have appeared in the windows. I have always liked the coziness and warmth of Christmas time, resting under my electric blanket in front of the Christmas movies on TV. My childhood Christmases were generally pretty decent, with Christmas tree decorations, piles of presents, and sometimes big family gatherings. And one year we stayed in a hotel in Åre. Me, my older brothers, cousins, my grandfather, and our Freya. Got a good portion of Christmas as a child and still live on that. By profession, I'm a doll maker. I make reborn dolls that are realistic and can pass as real babies. There are sculptors around the world who sculpt the models. They create little arms, legs, and a little head that are sent to a factory to be produced in vinyl. I and other reborn artists order these kits. We wash them and then we paint them with thin layers that are cured many times in the oven. I paint with brushes and sponge layers of pink, red, purple, blue, and skin tones to create 3D skin. Small nails should have tips and crescents. Eyelashes should be in place using a small needle, and eyes should be placed in their sockets inside the head. Veins and moles, stork bites, capillaries, and small rashes, scratches, or eczema should be applied to create realism, and small eyebrows should also be built with a small brush, one stride at a time, with shading and highlights. Then the hair, mostly soft mohair, is put in place strand by strand with a special needle, and after this lengthy process is attached with glue inside the head. Finally, the arms, legs, and fabric body are filled with grass granules and fiberfill, and a magnet is attached inside the head so that a special magnetic pacifier can be used for the reborn doll. A pile of photos is then taken and posted on forums and Facebook so that interested buyers can find them. Both men and women enjoy reborns, old people and children. They are used in grief management and dementia care. Some collect for the sake of collecting, others have them as real children and take them out in carts. There are premature babies and there are child-sized reborns, chubby and skinny, and all looks and ethnicities. I have been obsessed with this for 7 years now. Before that, I collected Cabbage Patch dolls, was quite obsessed with them too. It's strange really, because it wasn't even me who loved dolls, it was Elsa. When the Cabbage Patch dolls arrived in the 80s, they became big news and the demand was huge. We each got a Cabbage Patch doll and Elsa took hers everywhere. She felt so sorry for mine, which was left on the bed, that she took care of mine as well and made sure it was taken outside sometimes. Anyway, as an adult, I ordered large loads of Cabbage Patch dolls during a number of years. I enjoyed restoring them, washing and restyling them. I heard about reborns and ordered 2 newborn twins. When they arrived, the joy was tremendous. I became obsessed with painting twins, especially twins, but also singletons, children who needed a family, children who needed to be rescued. It was an expensive hobby, so I had to sell my entire Cabbage Patch doll collection and then my reborn dolls to be able to create new ones. All the time I was searching for new kits. I've painted thousands of dolls by now and have developed as a reborn artist. And in every doll I have made for myself or for others, I have searched for her face and for what has been lost. While I've been sitting for hours inserting hairs with a needle, I've been listening to audiobooks, and most recently, Yuval Noah Harari's Sapiens, A Brief History of Humanity. What is a human being? A human is an animal that evolved from an unconscious ape. As I listen to the human journey from the Stone Age through religion and revolution, discovery and war, I'm struck by the incomprehensible. That we built temples rather than dwellings and often chose suffering over well-being. For example, no one was happier when we went from hunter-gatherers to agriculture. On the contrary, diseases thrived, diets deteriorated, and backs were broken by the toil of the fields. No, we humans have not always been logical. It is as if we have been listening to a voice we could not define. Yes, as if we were striving for love, whatever that is. Of course, we have organized ourselves and found theories and solutions that are adapted to strengthen a certain group. But I feel that there's been an invisible force that has led us through our pain, a force that is not afraid of pain. Even though we as individuals think we want to avoid pain, sometimes at all cost. Who has decided that pain is a bad thing? There is so much good and important that comes from pain. Ideas, self-awareness, altruism, and acceptance. For example, throughout human history, I think I see a loving force leading us all through our own shortcomings towards something bigger than us, something we can't see or understand yet, because we haven't evolved that far. But in all our jostling and struggling, we have come closer through our sufferings. Every step and misstep is the way home in some way, but I can only speak for myself. I sold a doll on the forum recently to another with the name Elsa, and as always I thought, could it be her? Her messages were cheerful. Thank you, my dear, I have received the package. Imagine if that was my Elsa's warm tone. How wonderful life would be. But of course, it's not my Elsa emailing me through the forum. Once a twin, always a twin, that's for sure. Most twins think they are the luckiest people on earth, that they were born with their best friend, which is true for identical twins as well as fraternal twins. But in other cases, twinship can become an obstacle, and I imagine it can do so during difficult upbringings in dysfunctional families where emotional bonds can become so strained that they bind rather than support and carry, where siblings are turned against each other because their parents are unable to provide unconditional love. I also understand that the sense of justice between twins can take over your whole life, remembering how incredibly important it was that Elsa and I got the same things and exactly the same amount of everything, as if the whole world would revolve around this. It was upsetting. Twins can also get caught up in their competition with each other. There's jealousy. Elsa and I were spared, but spared this by her death. Of course, I wish she was here, as if my cells needed her cells, and at the same time, my missing Elsa is the most beautiful thing in my life. I've always felt an unrestrained love from her. However, I've had an abundance of self-doubt about my own existence. It started with me surviving, her losing this life that was ours together, me being left behind while she did not have to suffer what I have suffered. Was she the better twin? Or even worse, was I? Injustice is unbearable for twins. But while she didn't have to live with abusive parents, I had to find the strength and ability to move forward in life. She wasn't here, and at the same time, I would never have made it without her. The price is loss. In every face I have sought your face. In every voice I have listened for yours. I hear her in the music, the songs that convey her energy. I recognize it because I know her well, have come to know her in my consciousness throughout my life, just as I know her in my subconscious. All the time that your heart can beat, it will remain, it will keep. Beyond this green world that saw you born, my friend, the apples bloom once again. Beyond the wide, deep sea, there stands our root, you and me. And the very roots of the tree are our common origin and our emotional bond. The other day I was on a bus and there they were, the women, a pair of identical women, each holding a cup of latte in one hand while the other hand was grabbing the handrail. I felt the heat in my chest and I smiled and exhaled. Yes, there she was, and there she was, traveling together as well as separately. They looked happy, safe, and strong. I was knocked down inside. The tears flowed. It's been a long time since I felt so right just to live. When I lost her, I was stuck in a childhood that I had to survive. When she died, the bond with myself broke. My home environment forced me to become a warrior. There was no room to break down for any length of time. I went to school and experienced life, but inside me there was no gravity. I was floating freely. I was only able to take my own self back as an adult when the memories came like a huge patchwork and the loss and grief for Elsa became love. Then I could make myself me again. Everything has its time. Chapter 3 comments. Elsa is my twin, but she is also something else. A soul, a twin soul, and my other half. She has been with me throughout my whole life, and I cannot be without her. Elsa is also the mystery. What is your mystery?